I voted to remain in the European Union. But I support this bill because I believe the referendum was decisive. It was decisive because there was such a high participation. More people voted to leave the European Union than have ever voted for any British government in history. It was decisive because so many parts of the UK, although not all of them, voted that way. It was decisive because people were promised a referendum in the manifesto of the governing party of the country, and that it would be decisive. And I believe, my lords, that attempts to refight that referendum, which have begun a little in the last few days, are a great error. Asking people to rise up to fight Brexit, which was the words a few days ago of the former Prime Minister Tony Blair, are a great mistake. Now, I have enormous respect for him, more than many in his own party have, particularly as he roundly defeated me in the 2001 general election. But if 9 months after that I had asked people to rise up against the result, Mr. Blair would not have been very amused that I was doing so. He would have told me to listen to the voters and to abide by the result. And the same advice can be given to him in these circumstances. If there was a real chance of success, of rising up successfully against leaving the European Union, it would open up the most protracted, bitter, and potentially endless conflict in British society and politics that we have seen since the decades of debate on Irish Home Rule, and possibly even longer than that. It is not in the interests of our democracy and the governance of our country to do so. And if there is no or little prospect of that succeeding, all that is served by asking people to rise up against it is to strengthen the hand of some in the EU who believe that if they make it difficult enough in the negotiations, we will somehow lose heart, which does not help a successful negotiated outcome. And in any case, a country cannot go round in circles. Opinion will vary over the next few years. There will be opinion polls that say people do not agree with leaving the EU anymore, and then 6 months later that they do agree. But we cannot be leaving the EU in 2017 and remaining in it in 2018 and leaving it again in 2019 and by 2020 be too confused to know what we are doing. A country cannot go around in circles. A decision was made in the referendum. And I take issue with the noble Lord, Lord Newby, when he says people expressed a view in the referendum, which has a casual connotation to it, that they sauntered by the ballot box on 23rd of June and expressed a view about whether we should be in the EU. They made a decision in a process that was intended to be decisive and agreed at the time to be decisive. So as someone whose preference was to remain in the European Union, my second preference, given that that is not available, is to leave it with some degree of unity and good order and confidence and determination for the country to seek advantages from leaving the EU, since we will inevitably have the disadvantages of doing so. So the case for invoking Article 50 is overwhelming, and the case to do so now is inescapable. There is a need to end the uncertainty. I go a long way with the noble Lord, Lord Hope of Craighead, on this. There are immensely complex negotiations to undertake, and there is no reason to delay the start of those negotiations, as some have argued, because there are elections in Germany, France, the Netherlands. It is in the nature of the process set up by Article 50, with a 2-year timetable, that the real bargains and compromises and trade-offs and deals will be made near the end of that process, allowing time for the consideration of this Parliament and the European Parliament. And so elections in the next 6 months across Europe are no reason to delay that. That is not when those decisions will be made. So I conclude that this is necessary to do, and it is necessary to do it now. A real democratic accountability comes from the government being able to go to a general election in 2020 and be judged as to how it conducted this process, as well as in Parliament beforehand. And if those two things are true, what form should the bill take? Well, it should take as simple a form as possible. And again, I go a long way with the noble Lord Hope. I have negotiated many, many times in the European Union on behalf of this country, and anybody who is involved in this negotiation will want this legislation to be as simple and straightforward as possible, without additions to it that undercut and undermine the position of ministers. And this bill is pleasingly simple, unusually simple in its construction and its content. That is something that should be welcomed, my Lords. And I fear that amendments of process to the bill will turn out not to be so well thought out in 2 years' time, and that amendments of policy will undermine the positions of ministers as they seek a successful outcome. And so, therefore, my Lords, I think it is right to invoke Article 50, to do so now, and to do so with the simplest bill that it is possible to bring forward, and I commend ministers for doing so. Yeah.